Hello, BookTube. We are up to Chapter 6 of Bram Stoker's novel Dracula here in the Penguin Classic with an absolutely hideous cover. We are up to Chapter 6 in a read aloud being done by myself and Mark at Book Time with Elvis and Micah Cummins. And we're going to dive right in and save the inevitable Steve commentary for the end. We are starting off with Mina Murray's journal, dated the 24th of July in Whitby. Lucy met me at the station, looking sweeter and lovelier than ever, and we drove up to the house at the crescent in which they have rooms. This is a lovely place. The little river, the Esk, runs through a deep valley which broadens out as it comes near the harbor. A great viaduct runs across, with high piers, through which the view seems somehow further away than it really is. The valley is beautifully green, and it is so steep that when you are on the high land on either side, you look right across it, unless you are near enough to see down. The houses of the old town, side away from us, are all red-roofed and seem piled up over the other somehow, like the pictures we see in Nuremberg. Right over the town is the ruin of Whitby Abbey, which was sacked by the Danes and which is the scenic part of Marmion, where the girl was built up in the wall. Whitby Abbey is a beautiful ruin, and Marmion is a reference to a novel by Sir Walter Scott, which was absolutely common parlance when Bram Stoker wrote this. You wouldn't believe it now. No one reads Walter Scott now, but once upon a time, every detail of every major book that he wrote was known by every reader. But anyway, so let's move on. It is a most noble ruin, of immense size, and full of beautiful and romantic bits. There is a legend that a white lady is seen in one of the windows. Between it and the town there is another church, the parish one, round which is a big graveyard all full of tombstones. This, to my mind, is the nicest spot in Whitby, for it lies right over the town and has a full view of the harbor and all up the bay to where the headland called Kettleness stretches out into the sea. It descends so steeply over the harbor that part of the bank has fallen away, and some of the graves have been destroyed. In one place, part of the stonework of the grave stretches out over the sandy path far below. There are walks with seats beside them through the churchyard, and people go and sit there all day long looking at the beautiful view and enjoying the breeze. I shall come and sit here very often myself and work. Indeed, I am writing now, with my book on my knee, and listening to the talk of three old men who are sitting beside me. They seem to do nothing all day, but sit here and talk. The harbor lies below me, with, on the far side, one long granite wall stretching out into the sea, with a curve outwards at the end of it, in the middle of which is the lighthouse. A heavy sea-wall runs along outside of it. On the near side, the sea-wall makes an elbow crooked inversely, and its end, too, has a lighthouse. Between the two piers there is a narrow opening into the harbor, which then suddenly widens. Is that description any good? No. Is it important in any way? No. Is it meant to reflect that Bram Stoker has done a little research on Whitby? Yeah. It is nice at high tide, but when the tide is out, it shoals away to nothing, and there is merely the stream of the Esk running between the sands, with rocks here and there. Outside the harbor on this side there rises for about half a mile a great reef, the sharp edge of which runs straight out from behind the south lighthouse. At the end of it is a buoy with a bell, which swings in bad weather and sends in a mournful sound on the wind. They have a legend here that when a ship is lost, the bells are heard out at sea. I must ask the old man about this. He is coming this way. He is a funny old man. He must be awfully old, for his face is all gnarled and twisted like the bark of a tree. He tells me that he is nearly 100, and that he was a sailor in the Greenland fishing fleet when Waterloo was fought. He is, I am afraid, a very skeptical person, for when I asked him about the bells at sea and the White Lady in the Abbey, he said very brusquely, and here, BookTube, you must prepare yourself for what the great movie Blazing Saddles refers to as genuine frontier gibberish. I wouldn't fash, Massel, about them, miss. Them things be all wore out. Mind, I don't say that they never was, but I do say that they wasn't in my time. They be all very well for comers and trippers and the like, but not for a nice lady like you. Them feet folks from York and Leeds that be always eatin' cured herrin' and drinking tea and looking out to buy cheap jet would creed aught. I wonder, Massel, who'd be botherin' tellin' lies to them. even the newspapers, which is so full of fool talk. I thought he would be a good person to learn interesting things from. I have no idea why. So I asked him if he would mind telling me something about the whale fishing in the old days. He was just settling himself to begin when the clock struck 6, whereupon he labored to get up and said, "I must gang again, it is my home now, miss. My granddaughter doesn't like to be kept waiting when the tea is ready, for it takes me time to crammel aboon the grease, for there be many of 'em. Aye, miss, and a lack belly timber, sarely by the clock." he He hobbled away, and I could see him hurrying as well as he could down the steps. Whitby has a famous, elaborately long flight of steps. That is what's not being said here. You kind of need a picture to understand it. Otherwise, you're not really getting the geography here. But there's a famous, long, winding flight of steps there. The steps are a great feature of the place. They lead from the town up to the church. There are hundreds of them. I do not know how many. And they wind up in a delicate curve. The slope is so gentle that a horse could easily walk up and down them. I think they must originally have been something to do with the abbey. I shall go home too. Lucy went out visiting with her mother, and as they are only duty calls, I did not go. They will be home by this. So she's keeping up her journal. Next entry is for the 25th of July. I came up here an hour ago with Lucy, and we had a most interesting talk with my old friend and the 2 others who always come up to join him. He is evidently Sir Oracle of them, and I should think must have been in his time a most dictatorial person. He will not admit anything, and downfaces everybody. If he can't out-argue them, he bullies them, and then takes their silence for agreement with his views. Lucy was looking sweetly pretty in her white lawn frock. She has got a beautiful color since she has been here. I noticed that the old men did not lose any time in coming up and sitting near her when we sat down. She is so sweet with old people. I think they all fell in love with her on the spot. Even my old man succumbed and did not contradict her, but gave me double share instead. I got him on the subject of the legends, and he went off at once into a sort of sermon. I must try to remember it and put it down. It be all fool talk, lock, stock, and barrel, that's what it be, and nowt else. These bands and waffs and bow-ghosts and bargains and boglers and all on it, them is only fit to set bands of dizzy women a-belderin'. They be nowt but air blebs. They and all grims and signs and warnings be all invented by parsons and ilsome book bodies and railway touters to skeer at skinner halflins and get folks to do something that they don't otherwise incline to. It makes me ireful to think of them. Why, it's them that, not content with printing lies on paper and preaching them out of pulpits, does want to be cutting them on tombstones. It's tombstones to you and me. Look here all around you at what art you will. All them steens holding up their heads as well as they can out of their pride is a cant, simply tumbling down with the weight of the lies wrote on him. Here lies the body, or sacred to the memory, wrote on all of them, and yet in nigh half of them there ain't been no bodies at all, and the memories of them bean't cared a pinch of snuff about, much less sacred. Lies, all of them, nothing but lies, one kind or another. My gog, but it'll be square scouterment at the day of judgment, when they come tumbling up here in their death sarks, all juped together and trying to drag their tombsteins with them to prove how good they was. Some of them trembling and dithering with their hands in the dozen and slippery lying in the sea that they can't even keep their group of them. I could see from the old fellow's self-satisfied air and the way in which he looked round for the approval of his cronies that he was showing off. So I put in a word to keep him going. "Oh, Mr. Swales," that's the 100-year-old guy's name. "Oh, Mr. Swales, you can't be serious. Surely these tombstones are not all wrong." "Gablins!" "Bejabbers!" "Yablins! There may be a poorish few not wrong, savin' where they make out the people too good. For there be folks that do think a bomb bowl like the sea, if only it be their own. The whole thing be only lies. Now look you here. You come here and a stranger, and you see this Kurthgark." I nodded, for I thought it better to assent, though I did not quite understand his dialect. You and me both, sister. I knew it had something to do with the church. He went on. "And you can say all these steens be aboot folk that had hap to hear snod and snog?" I assented again. He's asking, do you think these are really tombstones of people who are here, nice and safe and sound? I assented again. Then that be just where the lie come in. Why, there be scores of these lay beds. The tomb is old Dun Bacca box on Friday night. He nudged one of his companions, and they all laughed. And my God, how could they be otherwise? Look at that one. The afters abaft the beer bank. Read it. I went over and read. Edward Spenceley, master mariner, murdered by pirates off the coast of Andres, April 1854, age 30. When I came back, Mr. Swales went on. Who brought him home, I wonder, to hap him here? Murdered off the coast of Andres, and you concited his body lay under. Why, I could name ye a dozen whose bones lie in the Greenland seas above. He pointed northwards, to Greenland, I suppose, or where the currents may have drifted them. There be steens about ye. Ye can, with your young eyes, read the small print of the lies from here. This Braithwaite Lowry, I knew his father, lost in the Lively off Greenland in 20, or Andrew Woodhouse, drowned in the same seas in 1777, or John Paxton, drowned off Cape Farewell a year later, or old John Rawlings, whose grandfather sailed with me, drowned in the Gulf of Finland in 50. You think that all these men will have to make a rush to Whitby when the trumpet sounds? I have me anthems aboot it. I tell you what, when we get here, they'd be jommelin' and jostling one another that way, and it'd be like a fight up on the ice in the old days, when we'd be at one another from daylight to dark, and trying to tie up our cuts by the light of the aurora borealis. This was evidently local pleasantry, for the old man cackled over it, and his cronies joined in the gusto. So probably when there was ice on the estuary, they went out and had day-long Donny battles and Donnyburgs with it, and then bound up their wounds by the light of the aurora borealis. But, I said, surely you're not quite correct, for you start on the assumption that all the poor people, or their spirits, will have to take their tombstones with them on the day of judgment. Do you think that will really be necessary? Well, what else will be tombstones for? Answer me that, miss. Well, to please relatives, I suppose. To please their relatives, you suppose? This he said with intense scorn. How will it please their relatives to know that lies is wrote of them, and that everybody in the place knows that they be lies? He pointed to a stone at our feet, which had been laid down as a slab on which the seat was rested, close to the edge of the cliff. Read the lines on that Truffstein, he said. The letters were upside down to me from where I sat, but Lucy was more opposite to them, so she leaned over and read, Sacred to the memory of George Canning, who died in the hope of glorious resurrection on July 29, 1873, falling from the rocks at Kettleness. His tomb is erected by his sorrowing mother to her dearly beloved son. He was the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. Really, Mr. Swales, I don't see anything very funny in that. She spoke her comment very gravely and somewhat severely. You don't see aught funny? But that's because you don't gon the sorrowing mom was a hellcat that hated him because he was a regular lamenter he was. And he hated her so much that he committed suicide in order that she mightn't get an insurance she put on his life. He blew nigh the top of his head off with an old musket that they had for the scaring of crows with. 'Twarn't for crows then, for it brought the clegs and the dolps to him. That's the way he fell off the rocks. And as to the hopes of a glorious resurrection, I've often heard him say myself that he hoped he'd go to hell, for his mother was so pious that she'd be sure to go to heaven, and he didn't want to addle where she was. Now isn't that a stain at any rate? He hammered it with his stick as he spoke. A pack of lies, and it won't make Gabriel keckle when Geordie comes panting up to the grease with a tombstone balanced on his hump and asked to be took as evidence. He's viewing the tombstones as some sort of legal argument that you will lug it with you to the pearly gates and say, no matter what you might think of me, see, here I have a lovely tombstone. I did not know what to say, but Lucy turned the conversation as she said, rising up, Oh, why did you have to tell us of this? It was my favorite seat, and I cannot leave it, and now I find I must go sitting over the grave of a suicide. That won't harm ye, my pretty, and it may make poor Geordie gladsome to have so trim a lass sitting on his lap. That won't hurt ye. Why, I've sat here on and off for nigh 20 years past, and it hasn't done no harm to me. Don't ye fash about them as lies under ye, or that doesn't lie there either. It'll be time for you to be getting scart when ye see the tombstones all run away with, and the place as bare as a stubble field. There's the clock, and I must gang. My service to ye ladies, and off he hobbled. Lucy and I sat a while, and it was all so beautiful before us that we took hands as we sat. And she told me all over again about Arthur and their coming marriage. That made me just a little heartsick, for I haven't heard from Jonathan in a whole month. Jonathan Harker, who is currently a prisoner of Count Dracula. And Arthur is one of the three men that young, pert, happy, free Lucy wishes she could marry all at the same time. One of her three suitors. And then the journal continues. Mina notes that it's the same day that she's adding this next part. I came up here alone, for I'm very sad. There was no letter for me. I hope there cannot be anything the matter with Jonathan. Mina's not the sharpest knife in the chandelier, as the mangled old saying goes. The clock has just struck 9. I see the lights scattered all over town, sometimes in rows where the streets are, sometimes singly. They run up the Esk and die away in the curve of the valley. To my left, the view is cut off from a black line of the roof of an old house next to the abbey. The sheep and lambs are bleating in the fields away from me, and there is a clatter of a donkey's hoofs up a paved road below. The band on the pier is playing a harsh waltz in good time, and further along the quay there is a Salvation Army meeting in a back street. Neither of the bands hears the other, but up here I hear and see them both. I wonder where Jonathan is and if he's thinking of me. I wish he were here. Then we move to Dr. Seward's diary. He is one of the lovelorn suitors of Lucy Westerny. This is dated for the 5th of June. So we're bouncing all around in time here. This is dated for the 5th of June. Dr. Seward runs an insane asylum, and one of his patients is a man named Renfield, who is later going to be connected with the Count, if he's not connected with the Count already. The case of Renfield grows more interesting the more I get to understand the man. He has certain qualities very largely developed: selfishness, secrecy, and purpose. I wish I could get at what the object of the latter. He seems to have some settled scheme of his own, but what it is I do not yet know. His redeeming quality is a love of animals, though indeed he has such curious turns in it that I sometimes imagine he is only abnormally cruel. His pets are of odd sorts. Just now his hobby is catching flies. He has at present a quantity that I have had myself to expostulate. To my astonishment, he did not break out into fury, as I expected, but took the matter in simple seriousness. He thought for a moment and then said, "May I have 3 days? I shall clear them away." Of course, I said that would do. I must watch him. Then the 18th of June, so 2 whole weeks later, he has turned his mind now to spiders and has got several very big fellows in a box. He keeps feeding them with his flies, and the number of the latter is becoming sensibly diminished, although he has used half his food in attracting more flies from outside of his room. Then the 1st of July. His spiders are now becoming a great nuisance as his flies, and today I told him that he must get rid of them. He looked very sad at this, so I said that he must clear out some of them at any events. He cheerfully acquiesced to this, and I gave him the same time as before for reduction. He disgusted me much while with him, for when a hard blowfly, bloated with some carrion food, buzzed into the room, he caught it, held it exultantly for a few moments between finger and thumb, and then, before I knew what he was doing, put it in his mouth and ate it. I scolded him for it, but he argued quietly that it was very good and very wholesome, that it was life, strong life, and gave life to him. This gave me an idea, or the rudiment of one. I must watch how he gets rid of his spiders. He has evidently some deep problem in his mind, for he keeps a little notebook in which he is always jotting down something. Whole pages of it are filled with masses of figures, generally single numbers added up in batches, and then the totals added in batches again, as though he were focusing some account, as the auditors put it. Then we move to the 8th of July. There is a method in his madness, and the rudimentary idea in his mind is growing. It will be a whole idea soon, and then, oh, unconscious celebration. You will have to give the wall to your conscious brother. I kept away from my friend for a few days so that I might notice if there were any change. Things remain as they were, except that he has parted with some of his pets and got a new one. He has managed to get a sparrow, and has already partially tamed it. His means of taming it is simple, for already the spiders have diminished. Those that do remain, however, are well fed, for he still brings in flies by tempting them with his food. Then we move on to July 19th, so another 2 weeks. We are progressing. My friend has now a whole colony of sparrows, and his flies and spiders are almost obliterated. When I came in, he ran to me and said he wanted to ask me a great favor, a very, very great favor, and as he spoke, he fawned on me like a dog. I asked him what it was, and he said, with a sort of rapture in his voice and bearing, a kitten. A nice, little, sleek, playful kitten that I can play with and teach and feed and feed and feed. I was not unprepared for this request, for I had noticed that his pets went on increasing in size and vivacity, but I did not care that his pretty family of tame sparrows should be wiped out in the same manner as the flies and spiders, so I said I would see about it and asked him if he would not rather have a cat than a kitten. His eagerness betrayed him as he answered, "Oh, yes, I would like a cat." "I only asked for a kitten lest you should refuse me a cat. No one would refuse me a kitten, would they?" I shook my head and said that at present I feared it would not be possible, but that I would see about it. His face fell, and I could see a warning of danger in it, for there was a sudden, fierce, sidelong look which meant killing. The man is an undeveloped homicidal maniac. I shall test him with his present craving and see how it will work out, and then I shall know more. Then we moved to 10 p.m. that night. I have visited him again and found him sitting in a corner brooding. When I came in, he threw himself on his knees before me and implored me to let him have a cat, that his salvation depended on it. I was firm, however, and told him that he could not have it, whereupon he went without a word and sat down, gnawing his fingers in the corner where I had found him. I shall see him in the morning early. Then we have the next day, July the 20th. Visited Renfield very early, before the attendant went his rounds. Found him up and humming a tune. He was spreading out his sugar, which he had saved, in a window, and was manifestly beginning his fly-catching again, and beginning it cheerfully and with a good grace. I looked around for his birds, and not seeing them, asked him where they were. He replied, without turning round, that they had all flown away. There were a few feathers about the room, and on his pillow a drop of blood. I said nothing, but went and told the keeper to report to me if anything were odd about him during the day. Then, at 11 a.m., the attendant has just been to see me to say that Renfield has been very sick and has disgorged a whole lot of feathers. My belief is, doctor, he said, that he has eaten his birds, and that he just took and ate them raw. Then at 11 p.m. that night, I gave Renfield a strong opiate tonight, enough to make even him sleep, and took away his pocketbook to look at it. The thought that has been buzzing about in my brain lately is complete, and the theory proved. My homicidal maniac is of a peculiar kind. I shall have to invent a new classification for him and call him zoophagus, life-eating maniac. What he desires is to absorb as many lives as he can, and he has laid himself out to achieve it in a cumulative way. He gave many flies to one spider and many spiders to one bird, and then wanted a cat to eat as many birds. What would have been his later steps? It would almost be worthwhile to complete the experiment. It might be done if there were only a sufficient cause. Men sneered at vivisection, yet look what it results in today. Why not advance science in its most difficult and vital aspect, the knowledge of the brain? Had I even the secret of one such mind, did I hold the key to the fancy of even one lunatic, I might advance my own branch of science to a pitch compared with which Bird and Sanderson's physiology or Ferrier's brain knowledge would be as nothing. Cutting-edge stuff, but pretty telling that we don't know those names. If only there were a sufficient cause. I must not think too much of this, or I may be tempted. A good cause might turn the scale with me, for may I not be too bold an exceptional brain, congenitively? How well the man reasoned. Lunatics always do within their own scope. I wonder at how many lives he values a man, or if at only one. He has closed the account most accurately, and today begun a new record. How many of us begin a new record with each day of our lives? To me, it seems only yesterday that my whole life ended with a new hope, and that truly I began a new record. So it will be until the great recorder sums me up and closes my ledger about with a balance or a profit or a loss. With a balance to profit or loss. Oh, Lucy, Lucy, I cannot be angry with you, nor can I be angry with my friend whose happiness is yours. But I must only wait on hopeless and work. Work. If only I could have as strong a cause as my mad friend there, a good, unselfish cause to make me work, that would indeed be happiness. Okay, so we're passing on to Mina Murray's journal now. The point that you want to get from the Good Doctor's journal is that he's every bit as crazy as Renfield. Anyway, with Mina's journal, we are going to the 26th of July. I am anxious, and it soothes me to express myself here. It is like whispering to oneself and listening at the same time. That is a very good description of keeping a journal, I might add. And it's also something that has been echoed in Jonathan Harker, keeping his journal over in the Count's castle. And there is also something about the shorthand symbols that makes it different from writing. I am unhappy about Lucy and about Jonathan. I had not heard from Jonathan for some time and was very concerned, but yesterday dear Mr. Hawkins, who is always so kind, sent me a letter from him. I had written asking him if he had heard, and he said the enclosed had just been received. It is only a line dated from Castle Dracula and says that he is just starting for home. That is not like Jonathan. I do not understand it, and it makes me uneasy. Well, if it makes you uneasy, dearie, how about you write to Castle Dracula yourself? Mr. Hawkins surely knows the address. Or if you're really uneasy, how about you put a few crowns in a bag and go to Castle Dracula to see what the holdup is? Anyway. Then, too, Lucy, although she is so well, has lately taken to her old habit of walking in her sleep. Her mother has spoken to me about it, and we have decided that I am to lock the door of my room every night. Mrs. Westerna has got an idea that sleepwalkers always go out on roofs of houses and along the edges of cliffs, and then get suddenly wakened and fall over with a despairing cry that echoes all over the place. Poor dear, she is naturally anxious about Lucy, and she tells me that her husband, Lucy's father, had the same habit, that he would get up in the night and dress himself and go out if he were not stopped. Lucy is to be married in the autumn. She is already planning out her dresses and how our house is to be arranged. I sympathize with her, for I do the same, only Jonathan and I will start life in a very simple way, and shall have to try to make both ends meet. Mr. Holmwood, he is the Honourable Arthur Holmwood, only son of Lord Godalming, is coming up here very shortly, as soon as he can leave town, for his father is not very well, and I think dear Lucy is counting the moments till he comes. She wants to take him up to the seat on the churchyard cliff and show him the beauty of Whitby. I dare say it is the waiting which disturbs her. She will be all right when he arrives. Then we move on to July the 27th, so the next day. No news from Jonathan. I am getting quite uneasy about him, though why I should I do not know. But I do wish that he would write, if only a single line. Lucy walks more than ever, and each night I am awakened by her moving about the room. Fortunately, the weather is so hot that she cannot get cold. But still, the anxiety of the perpetually being wakened is beginning to tell on me, and I am getting nervous and wakeful myself. My God, Lucy's health keeps up. Mr. Holmwood has been suddenly recalled to Ring to see his father, who has been taken seriously ill. Lucy frets at the postponement of seeing him, but it does not touch her looks. She is a trifle stouter, and his cheeks are lovely rose pink. She has lost that anemic look which she had. I pray it will last. Yes, we're all praying that Lucy doesn't undergo a sudden loss of blood. And then the 3rd of August. Another week gone, and no news from Jonathan, not even to Mr. Hawkins, from whom I have heard. Oh, I do hope he is not ill. He surely would have written. I look at that last letter of his, but somehow it does not satisfy me. It does not read like him, yet it is his writing. There is no mistake of that. Lucy has not walked much in her sleep the last week, but there is an odd concentration about her which I do not understand. Even in her sleep she seems to be watching me. She tries the door, and finding it locked, goes about the room, searching for the key. Then the 6th of August, 3 days later. Another 3 days, and no news. This suspense is getting dreadful. If only I knew where to write or where to go, I should feel easier, but no one has heard a word of Jonathan since his last letter. I must only pray to God for patience. Lucy is more excitable than ever, but is otherwise well. You know, in addition to praying to God for patience, you could get Mr. Hawkins to write 10 letters to Castle Dracula. Or let you write to Castle Dracula. Or maybe send someone to Castle Dracula. But anyway. Last night was very threatening, and the fishermen say that we are in for a storm. I must try to watch it and learn the weather signs. Today is a gray day, and the sun, as I write, is hidden in thick clouds high over Kettleness. Everything is gray, except the green grass, which seems like emerald among it. Gray, earthy rock, gray clouds, tinged with the sunburst at the far edge, hang over the gray sea, into which the sand points stretch like gray fingers. The sea is tumbling in over the shallows and the sandy flats with a roar, muffled in sea mist drifting inland. The horizon is lost in a gray mist. All is vastness. The clouds are piled up like giant rocks, and there is a brool over the sea that sounds like some presage of doom. Dark figures are on the beach here and there, sometimes half shrouded in the mist, sometimes men like trees walking. That's an allusion to the New Testament. The fishing boats are racing home and rise and dip in the groundswell as they sweep into harbor, bending to the scuppers. Here comes old Mr. Swales. He's making straight for me, and I can see by the way he lifts his hat that he wants to talk. God help us all. I've been quite touched by the change in the poor old man. When he sat down beside me, he said in a very gentle way, "I want to say something to you, miss." I could see he was not at ease, so I took his poor old wrinkled hand in mine and asked him to speak fully. So he said, leaving his hand in mine, "I'm afraid, my dearie, that I must have shocked you all by the wicked things I've been saying about the dead and such like for weeks past, but I didn't mean them, and I want you to remember that when I'm gone. We old folks that be daffled and with one foot abaft the crock-hool don't altogether like to think of it, and we don't want to feel scared of it, and that's why I've took to making light of it, so that I'd cheer up my own heart a bit. But Lord love ye, miss, I ain't afraid of dying, not a bit. Only I don't want to die if I can help it. My time must be nigh any hand now, for I be odd, 100 years is too much for any man to expect, so I'm nigh it that the odd man be already whetting his scythe." It's the Grim Reaper with his scythe. "You see, I can't get out of the habit of caffing about it all at once. The chaffs will wag as they used to. Some day, soon, the angel of death will sound his trumpet for me. But don't y'all do and greet me dearie, for he saw that I was crying. If he should come this very night, I'd not refuse to answer his call, for life be, after all, only a waiting for something else than what we're doing, and death be all we can rightly depend on. But I'm content, for it's coming to me, my dearie, and coming quick. It may be coming while we be looking and wondering. Maybe it's in that wind over the sea, and that's bringing with it loss and wreck and sore distress and sad hearts. Look, look, he cried suddenly. There's something in that wind and in the host beyond that sounds and looks and tastes and smells like death. It's in the air. I feel it coming. Lord, make me answer cheerful when my call comes." He held up his arms devoutly and raised his hat. His mouth moved as though he were praying. After a few minutes' silence, he got up, shook hands with me, and blessed me, and said goodbye, and hobbled off. It all touched me and upset me very much. I was glad when the Coast Guard came along with his spyglass under his arm. He stopped to talk with me, as he always does, but all the time kept looking at a strange ship. "I can't make her out," he said. "She's a Russian, by the look of her, but she's knocking about in the queerest way. She doesn't know her mind a bit. She seems to see the storm coming, but can't decide whether to run up north in the open or to put in here. Look there again. She's steered mighty strangely, for she doesn't mind the hand on the wheel, changes about with every puff of wind. We'll hear more of her before this time tomorrow." And that ends chapter 6. And there are two main things. I hate to show you this horrible cover while we're talking, but two things that we can point out here. One is the enormous self-indulgence that Bram Stoker indulges in here in this chapter, with all of that local dialect and all the local lore of Whitby, that goes on and on and on and on. And it is mainly, I think, meant to do two things. I think, one, it's meant for Bram Stoker to clear out his notebooks. Novelists always feel like they need to clear out their notebooks. They fill up notebooks with research. And then they feel like when they're writing the book, they need to clear those notebooks out. They need to get them into the book. There's always a bad idea. Nothing is gained in this chapter by reproducing Mr. Swales' indigenous dialogue. That's one thing. And the other element of that I think is meant to happen here is that it's meant to draw the world of the dead very close to the world of the living. Right? Not only literally, because Mr. Swales has known a lot of these dead people, being 100 years old and sailing off the coast during the Battle of Waterloo, but also in the sense that it's removing the sanctity from death in a graveyard, where we're looking out at all these pious tombstones, And he's saying over and over again and laughing that a lot of them are lies, that almost all of them are. It serves as yet another brick in the wall, yet another chink in the armor of Mina Murray's innocence, which is taking dents and dings long before the main events of the book unfold. Hearing all of those impious things from an old man in a graveyard is pretty shocking. And that is one thing that happens in this chapter. And another thing that happens in this chapter is something that is foreshadowed in the chapter that Micah read last time, and that is unfortunately became a kind of a staple of horror novels, which is that unchristian people die. Morally suspect in when the morals are Christian morals. Morally suspect Christians have a big target painted on them. And although the emphasis there is not explicitly on Christianity anymore, it is still true in a lot of popular horror entertainment that the bad people die, which is a really, really bad thing. It's a really dangerous, pernicious, sapping gimmick to happen in horror novels. It makes them into, unwillingly on the part of a lot of the authors, it makes them into something every bit as creaky and preachy as a medieval morality play. And I don't appreciate it. I don't like the fact that this early in the novel, I am worried an extra amount for Lucy because she has 3 lovers. I'm worried an extra amount for her. At the beginning of the novel, at the beginning of Dracula, I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, I don't think she's going to live through this book. I look at old Mr. Swales, just from this chapter, mocking the piety of the dead and taking light of the afterworld, and I think his pro forma apology at the end notwithstanding, and I think, okay, old as you are, you're not going to live out this novel either. Whereas the God-fearing good people like Mina and Jonathan, even though Jonathan is in the most danger of anybody in the book, I still... Anyway, those are far off from this chapter in any kind of read aloud, especially when you're sharing all of the reading duties with other people. It's random chance is always going to roll up to you a dud of a chapter. This chapter could have been affected much better than it is, much better. Also, Bram Stoker wants to use these diary entries to create a kind of telegraphic immediacy in the book. But he misserves his purpose by wedding himself to that so early on in the story. I wish that he hadn't. When we get Dr. Seward's diary entries about Renfield, the main focus of the main purpose, the main effect of those diary entries is to make us think that Dr. Seward is not well. He's weirdly obsessed. It takes the emphasis entirely off Renfield. Imagine what a dramatic description of those visits to Renfield would be like instead. They'd be far more effective. Same thing with Lucy, who has taken to sleepwalking, no doubt connected with the fingers of that dark storm coming to the town on the horizon. She's taken to sleepwalking again. And we're told telegraphically by Mina in her diary that sometimes she gets up and walks about the room looking for a key. Imagine how much better a scene that would be if it had been written straight up as narrative instead of a diary entry. But that's chapter 3. That's chapter 3 of Dracula. I won't always get a dud of a chapter. I'm hoping that's the last Whitby dialect I ever have to read in my life. Anyway, we'll move on from here. Of course, we are trading off the duties, so we go back to the Master of Ceremonies to Mark at Book Time with Elvis, and I will see you for what? Chapter 9? Mark will do chapter... Math is not my strong suit. Mark will do chapter 7. Michael will do chapter 8. Yeah. I'll do chapter 9. So, but tune in to Mark next time because you don't want to lose track of the story. And believe me, Mark and Micah won't give these little postscripts of intrusive Steve commentary. I'm very sorry about that. I don't seem to be able to stop myself. I will wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you.